Whenever a new tome is released in Dead by Daylight, nothing excites me more than reading the new lore entries we are drip-fed over the coming weeks of its release. While I appreciate the extra backstories on existing killers and survivors, the main course in my eyes are the various story logs of the Observer. Without these stories, the narrative that Behaviour's main writer is trying to create would not be as interesting nor satisfying. One of my favourites is when a passage from the first ever tome back in 2019 foreshadowed Elodie Rakoto being a survivor. Something has always bugged me whenever I read the Observer's stories, and that is the non-linear aspect of the Arcus logs. This is probably done on purpose to create a sense of mystery and the feeling of not having the whole entire picture of the Observer's saga within the entity's realm. But it still annoys me that we don't actually know when these events are taking place. If it was not for the very convenient numbering of each Arcus log that we know follows a linear ascending release pattern, due to the various stories that continue off one another in order. So I took it upon myself to place all released Arcus entries in chronological order, from earliest to latest, to see if the story even makes sense when rearranged to be more linear instead of random jumps, where one paragraph is about how the Observer is going mentally insane, and then the preceding one is the Observer lore dumping how the Aurus works in complete mental clarity. I also included side stories such as the Chamber of Blood and similar excerpts in places I seemed to fit well within the main entries. Instead of explaining every single Arcus entry, I will summarise the timeline of what has occurred as of the current tome crescendo with the events I found important. Our story begins when the Observer ends up within the entity's realm and finds the tower. An unknown amount of time passes before he starts his documentation, but he does write the occasional note here and there. This period I will call Before Arcus, or BA for short. The notes and scribblings written in the BA period are called Obscura. Notably in these Obscura, a trove of stories from the Omniverse are found within the basement of the tower. These are named by the Observer as the Chamber of Blood, referring to the putrid black sludge that covered the books when he first found them. Other books found include journals of past occupants that seem to share his love for horror stories and whiskey. He also comes to understand that the tower itself is alive, twisting and shifting frequently, with doors that could lead to entirely different locations at a whim. The Observer starts to write the Arcus files. He gets his bearings on the situation, finding books and material from various unknown authors, reading entries from the Chamber of Blood, specifically the Harbinger of Hellsagas, Evil Eyes, Worlds Away, and Beneath the Ruins, and fixing his Aurus to be fully functional since it was broken. The Aurus is important as it allows the Observer to utilize the entity's auric black fog to materialize items and view memories of survivors and killers within the entity's grasp. These memories are known as the Archives and are the backstories of the playable characters in-game. One day, the Observer hears a knock on his door. Opening it with caution, he was confused to see a bottle of whiskey with an invitation to the entity's birthday. A prank by the entity, or from a marooned soul, he wonders to himself. Time passes with the Observer most likely either reading books or viewing past memories, both of them with a whiskey in his free hand, searching for further knowledge on how to escape or simply as a means of escapism from the present. He notes that overuse of the Aurus has side effects of survivors' memories merging with his own, but he brushes that off as a minor inconvenience, as he is determined to risk it all to defeat the entity. As a result of his memory viewing, he comes to further understand the inner workings of the Ancient that traps him, how it feeds off the raw emotion of the survivors and killers when the trials are undergone. He continues to drink, view memories, drink some more, and wait for sleep to take him away from this nightmare. The Observer is awoken in the middle of his sleep by gut-wrenching shrieks. Unable to go back to sleep, he climbs to the roof and drives golf balls into the abyss until the screams subside. The next day, someone leaves hardened eyeballs in a bucket at his doorstep with the note, "Best balls ever." He mentions it must be a gift from his mysterious friend. He finds another memory of Vigo in the archives, a memory in which he is manifesting with an object similar to the Aurus. He also witnesses several survivors going mad within the trials, and first mentions the existence of the Void, a realm where survivors end up once the abundant reservoir of emotion dries up completely, the disposal chute of the entity's many realms. More time passes, and someone or something starts leaving glyphs within the trials that help the Observer navigate and research realms with greater ease. most likely being the mysterious friend he mentions earlier but is unsure. Energy continues to be sent to him over this period, which lets him open small windows of realms himself. A huge leap in discovery, all thanks to this mystery ally. The observer was never able to do this before, and it allows him to delve deeper into the unknown, frantically looking for answers to his salvation. Alas, his search is inconclusive, and he resigns to old stories retold by a construct of his design. The Aurus creates a humanoid-shaped black fog creature who loosely resembles one of his favorite podcast hosts. The observer remarks he is becoming more adept at materialization. As he listens, the observer acknowledges that heavy overuse of the Aurus's memory viewing capabilities has resulted in the thought patterns of the people inside those memories merging with his own, effectively giving himself a type of schizophrenia. 2 more rifts are open, and he enters one and explores it, pondering if it's even possible to open a rift-like door to his homeworld. The observer adds realm browsing to his tiresome routine of reading books, viewing archives, and most importantly, drinking. The pure isolation within the tower is starting to sink its claws. The endless fog and sickening silence overtakes the observer, despairing over the fact that all the knowledge on ancients from his homeworld barely scratched the surface of the entity. Nevertheless, he toils onward in the pursuit of knowledge, eventually finding the past memories of an unknown survivor that we now know to be Elodie Rakoto. He notes that a cult for the entity is pretty commonplace among worlds, given his past readings of the Harbinger series. After this, he finds imprints within the archives of a killer that we have not seen yet, and memories of a Claudette that are uncharacteristic of her usual self. He narrows this down to being that the entity has clear preferences of certain traits among the souls it selects throughout the Omniverse. Time passes once more, and the observer does anything to distract himself from the ever-present deaths occurring within the trials. Around this time, the story of Terra Arachna are read in the Chamber of Blood. From reading this story and most likely similar ones depicting apocalyptic level events, the observer comes to a conclusion that the entity doesn't just consume worlds, but taps into the inhabitants' collective fears and models the destruction off of them, taking pleasure in creating the perfect design of misery for a planet, a voluntary action, choosing torture over mercy. Again, he is taken aback by his flawed understanding of ancients, an understanding that he once thought to be fully realized. After a brief glance into the spider hellscape of Terra Arachna, he seals off the rift in his basement. He hears the noises outside. He sees the movements in the fog, and he prays that the tower isn't compromised. One day from a window, the observer spots a strange moving light in the fog, a light that, while enchanting, brings great unease. Who sent it? What is it? All he can do is sit in the tower and watch as it moves in the wind, wondering if it's trying to convey a message. The eye-like beacon continues to watch him with its haunting movements. It is unclear if the light disappears or stays in the lore, so I assume it eventually leaves the tower. Thus we enter the part of the story where the observer's mental state reaches a new critical low. The tower lifestyle has finally got to him, and it's only getting worse. All his research, countless journals, memories, rifts, archives, and it all seems for naught. The futility of the trials and how death is not an escape. The meaning of everything is lost on the observer, and he doesn't know what to believe. His mania is apparent as he recollects all he has done and wonders if it is all a sick game created by the entity. A trial outside the trials, specifically crafted for those smart enough to escape them, feeding on emotions of alienation, boredom, and insanity, waiting for him to end his own life, so the cycle can begin again. A cycle that the observer worries he has repeated once before. Alongside his extreme existential thoughts, the psyche-altering drawbacks of the Aurus have become so severe that he cannot even make sense of his reality. Unable to distinguish memories from the very ones he studied, he views horrific murders with a sense of pleasure, likely from an overdose of killers' memories. Looking in the mirror, his face is shattered into dozens of people other than his own. It overwhelms him, shattering the reflection of his madness with his fist. The tool to his salvation may very well be his downfall. One time he wakes soaked in blood without recollection of the night before, contemplating whether the head injuries were from an attack or self-inflicted. Later, he finds a mound of purple flesh at his bedside, unknown of what creature from the fog it once was. Undeniably, the observer needs a break from the Aurus and decides not to use it until his current mental state improves. However, the intruding memories still run rampant in his mind and cause extreme mental strain, phasing in and out of lives that aren't his. He hopes that if he truly loses himself to the Aurus's effects, the archives could bring him back into the light. Yet again, the observer wakes with short-term amnesia and with no recollection of past days. The multiple empty bottles of whiskey surrounding him might explain why, but there is a more urgent matter. Several dead bodies are covered on the roof alongside his golf club, bloodied from fervent bludgeoning. Closer inspection reveals the bodies are an auric conjuration of the observer's adversaries from Terra Primus, the group that had forced him into this nightmare in the first place. They deserve far worse fates than this for their crimes, he scoffs. Substance abuse is the observer's favorite pastime. More specifically, whiskey. It ties him back to his homeworld where strong memories of friends and family reside. But when the alcohol subsides, he realizes that he has ransacked the tower in a violent drunken rage, destroying art and statues he once created from memories of other worlds. He accepts that his grip on reality is very loose, with every day melding into another. The hysteria doesn't stop. A plethora of severed heads are scattered in his den with appearances from recent memories that were experienced. The observer laboured away all night, moving them outside the door in a pile. When completed, the heads came to life and bickered amongst themselves unintelligibly. He shut his eyes, wishing for silence, and when it finally came, he opened them, but the heads were gone. Desiring normalcy, the observer rushes to read more stories from the Chamber of Blood. Stories like Old Bloody, The Tale That Follows, and the most brutal murder in Sunny Lake history. A cacophony of shrieks forcibly wakes the observer. Quickly moving to a window, he sees creatures in the fog being created, then suddenly destroyed right after. Some fought amongst themselves, tearing each other apart. It's as if the entity entered a state of shock suddenly. Armed with his 9-iron club, he waited for any unexpected attack. Though nothing came, so instead he played golf on the roof, processing the short-lived irregularity that was just witnessed. Ironically enough, when the entity's creatures did attack, he was not prepared at all. The squid-like creatures born from the fog threw themselves at the tower's entrances, a voracious desire to destroy everything and everyone within. The observer toiled, keeping them at bay until it proved futile, escaping with the Aurus and other valuables into a pocket realm to hide. Upon re-entry of the tower, when the assault eventually subsided, the man was greeted with the hideous display of a ravaged study and creatures decaying bodies which leaked putrid blood. He had some cleaning up to do. Days pass, and the observer finds dead bodies again, this time in his newly cleaned study. The corpses mutilated beyond reason. Having the familiar short-term amnesia, he had trouble discerning the culprit of this act. Unsure if he entered another murderous rampage, becoming someone else from a memory he viewed, he does not know the answer. The next time we hear from our prisoner, he is enjoying the suffering that the trials create, watching as survivors succumb to death from mortal wounds, mentioning that their memories are wiped before the cycle begins anew. From here on, all the observer does is look at memories of killers and survivors, specifically the hillbilly and David Kings. It is worth documenting, however, that he admits to watching the bouts of murder that the hillbilly commits more than once, as he finds Max disturbingly amusing. And that is the story so far. Though clunky at times, it is certain that when fully completed, the observer's journey will be more coherent when put in order. Props to the writer at Behaviour for constructing a storyline that works so well within the incremental release period tied to the Battle Pass system. Creating entries that stand on their own when released, but when placed into chronology, it connects and flows off one another. The only downside to a live service game such as Dead by Daylight, new lore gets released all the time, meaning that this video will probably be outdated within a few months. Nevertheless, when those come out, feel free to come back to this video to see where they fit within the ever-growing story of the Observer. If you are interested in this video, I implore you to read the Arcus logs yourself. They are packed full of detail and have explanations on the intricacies of the lore that I have omitted, such as how the Aurus actually works. I have linked these logs in the description, as well as the Dead by Daylight wiki, which also has wonderful information to explore. Thanks for watching.